And we're live. So, hälsa er. Welcome to Old Norse for Reenactors Lesson 3. Y'all make sure that I am online. Get back at me in the chat. Let me know if y'all are hearing me or if there's any problems before I really get started. Make sure that I am online. Get back at me. Let me get that. All right. Don't need an echo chamber. All right. So, last week with lesson 2, we continued on with some greetings, which we did lesson 1 via chat. I'm not going to go over everything we've done, but one of the big ones that we need to go back over, because I had to kind of rush through it, were the introductions. How to say my name is or I am called. So I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly. Stop me in the chat if you need me. Ek heiti, I am or I am called. Þú heitir, you are called. Han, hon, that, heitir. He, she, it is called. Ver heitum, we are called. Þeir heitið, y'all are called. And þeir, thar, thou, heita, they are called, and that's the masculine, feminine, and neuter. So, for instance, I would say ek heiti skeggi. Literally, my name is Skeggi, or I am called Skeggi. And then the follow question to that would be, What heter du? Excuse me, what heter du? Which means, what is your name, or what are you called? So, just as a reminder, in the group, which I believe everybody is a part of except for maybe our new buddy, hi Matt, we'll get you into the group for Old Norse for Reenactors. Then we should be able to move on. There will be a word list for lesson 2 already up, and I'll have a word list for this lesson at the end of the lesson. All right. So it looks like we may be having some difficulty, so I'm going to see what's going on over here. Make sure that the YouTube's working for y'all. If not, this is going to be really awkward. I'm about to start over again, but it's all good. Alright, it's saying it's live on my end, and has been for about 4 minutes. So, I'm going to keep going on then. So, I'm going to do something a little bit different, a little bit more fun, I think, tonight. At least one thing that's going to be fun. I can't guarantee this is all going to be fun. we're going Sesame Street. So today is brought to you by the number ein, which would be 1. And today is also brought to you by the letter of the rune fe. And the Old Norwegian rune poem for fe reads Fe vlater Fe valder frenderoge, fodes ofer iskoge, which means wealth is a source of discord among friends. The wolf lives in the forest. All right, so again, that was the number ein, or 1, and the letter phi, which comes into English as an F or a V. We'll go a little bit more over the rune system and actually writing with the runes a little bit later. So before we actually get into adjectives, there's something we need to cover, which is the verb to be. To be in every language, the verb to be in every language is always difficult because it gets used so often that it's almost never regular. So if you think in English, the verb would be I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, they are, y'all are. It's the exact same thing. You know, in English, that's a weird one that you just kind of have to learn. It is the same in Old Norse. In that it is weird and you just have to learn it. But we are lucky that for the most part, it kind of makes sense and that it sounds a lot like English. So remember, when it comes to this, that every verb can be plural, or it can be singular or plural, which means it can be one or it can be many, and it can be in all 3 persons. So first person I, second person you, third person he, she, it. So let me make sure I got that in there. All right. So for the verb to be, starting at first person singular, it's ek, im, I am, ek, im, du, ert, you are, du, ert, dat, dat, he, she, it is, that is. Ver, erum, we are. Ver, eruth, y'all are. And thou, eru, they are. So The reason we had to go over that, and again, I'm going to put that up in the file I'll be adding to the group here in just a few minutes, is because when we're talking about adjectives, which is the big goal for the night, it's important to be able to say who you're talking about or what you're talking about. So I'm going to try and not fly through today's lessons. Because it would be a little easy to do, unfortunately. I'm going to try and avoid doing that. So I've got a fairly large list of adjectives. Later on, if we decide to get more into the hows and whys of the language, we'll see that nouns decline in certain ways, and by that I mean they change for the exact same things we just saw, or for what we saw with, for instance, the pronouns, for the cases, for the genders, for the first person, second person, third person. But for ease of study right now, what I've done is I just have the nominative version. Which is a good way to find it in the dictionary, and I will give y'all a link on my page. Let me go ahead and add that while I'm thinking about it. I have a great link to a online dictionary for Old Norse. It is the standard, I would say, that all Old Norse students follow, which is an Icelandic and English dictionary by Richard Cleesby and Guthbrand Vigfusson. It was first published in 1874, and the great thing about that, it means that everything is public domain and online. I will give you a warning though, it is searchable, but when you search for it, it will also search through a handful of other dictionaries, from Old English, Old Norse, Proto-Germanic, Old Frisian is in there as well. There's a handful of dictionaries that this is linked with, so you have to watch and make sure you're using the Cleesby Vigfusson. If you have any questions on using that, just let me know. All right, so sorry about that, Nicole. I'll definitely hold it up a little bit longer on the next ones. And like I said, I'll have that file that's got the table in there for you as well. So the first group of words I'm going to start with all mean handsome or pretty. I thought that would be a good one to start with on a positive note. I'm going to write down a handful of them, and we'll go over each one individually as far as pronunciation and if it's got any special extra to it, which a couple of these do. All right. Yes, Roland, that is you. So the first one we have up there is Askelikar. Askelikar. The next one is Da Felger. Excuse me. Da Felger. The next one is Frieder, not to be confused with Frither. That's a completely different concept we're not going to get into. So, Frieder. And the last one is Van. So, with these Da Felger, whenever you see that D long A prefix, that part of it right there, it means exceedingly or very. So da Felege would be extremely handsome or very pretty. Freda is especially used of the face. So something along the lines of Freya hat eine Friedefade, which is Freya has a face or a visage which is beautiful. That would work there, while you couldn't do the same thing with Van, which just means handsome. You couldn't say Freya hat ein Van von, or Van von. Fad, not Van. It works, but not as well as Freda, which should be used if you're describing someone's face. I'll beat that horse dead. Now, since we did handsome or pretty, it only serves right that we also do ugly or unfair. You will notice a couple of these words that you recognize, at least if you're paying attention, just in a slightly different form, and I'll explain why here in just a second. So much easier to write this way. Sorry for last week when everything was backwards. It's backwards on my screen, so I assumed it was backwards on yours as well. So, for the word ugly, we have ufega, uvan, and ufelege. So you might recognize van and felege, but with that prefix of long u. That's a pretty common way to negate a word. Is to add that prefix u. So you'll see, I try not to make that a common thing I did after this, as far as just taking the same word and adding an u, because that gets really repetitive. But do know for most of these words, I would venture to say 98% of them, adding that prefix works to make it the opposite. So to describe a person beyond their outward appearance, you might venture to say that someone is clever or wise or intelligent. So how would you do that? Well, pretty easily. Actually, some of these are downright familiar. Roland, you would say that, for instance, if I were saying it to you, Roland, the question for if you're not in the chat or not have eyes on the chat is how you would say, like, I am Vaughn is the word he used particularly. So for I am Vaughn, you would say ek im Vaughn. And it's not the long A, it's the AE ligature. So it's that ash letter I talked about. Now, if I were to say that of Roland, I would say Roland Van, which uses that third person singular. He is. So that's why I went over the to be verb. Most of these will take the verb to be. So for the word wise or clever or intelligent, snotter means wise. If you are familiar with the Norse myths, you might recognize this as the daughter of Freya, or more properly pronounced Freya. Snota or Snotra, as she is known, is wisdom personified. Hagen means clever, intelligent, or discreet, as does skierliger. So Hagen and skierliger. And again, you could negate all of these by adding that long oo preference. So if you say that something is unwise, then you could say, for instance, usnotter. But one that comes up a lot, especially in the myths and in a lot of the sagas, it's a really common, I would venture to say, word that's spoken is heimskja. Heimskja. It means foolish. So, for instance, in the Harbardsljóð, the Lay of Harbard, where you have a bickering match essentially between Odin in disguise and Thor. This word is thrown along a lot. Heimskja. You often hear Du ert heimskja. You are foolish. So that's a, like I said, that's a really common one. That's a good one to know if you are going to be trying to speak a fair amount. Color. is a big one. So I've got a couple different colors on here, especially ones that you see again in the myth or in the sagas, because when I was coming up with this list, that's what I looked at. So if you have different questions about some colors, I might be able to look them up while we're online. No guarantees, just depending on how much I can peel away to look. So the first one is wheat. Wheat. This is white, like the background of the color. You'll often see it used as kind of the way we use white in religious connotation, as in pure or clean. So, for instance, Heimdallr, the guardian at the Bifrost leading into Asgard, is who the Marvel version of pronunciation, if you're not following me, is Heimdall. But Heimdallr. He is described as the hvít ass, the white ass, because he shines. Svart. Svart is swarthy or black. It's sometimes used to describe like a blacksmith as sooty. So you have, again, to go into the myth, the Svartalfar, the Black Elves, which is a byname for the dwarves, or maybe a different kind of elf dealing with nighttime. You also have, on this same vein as Svart, or as Hvít rather, Svart can sometimes mean something like dirty or unclean, though that's a little bit more rare. And then Hrálfr. Hrálfr is red. So, for instance, Thor is often described as the Hrálfbard, the red beard. All right, so that's a handful of colors. So yeah, if you have some other questions on colors, shoot them to me in the into the chat. Which, Voland, I think you're the only one that's actually still in the chat and live. We may have lost Seth again. All right, so going back onto some descriptor words that you might use for people more often. A big one is strong or mighty. And there are, as you might guess, a lot of these words. I picked some of the ones that I think are easiest to remember, and also probably used more often, though I couldn't say that for certain. So my top three are Megan, Hrálfr, and Sterkjan. So Megan is particularly mighty or strong, or the old sense of the word main. So you might have a megnaver, a strong man or a mighty man. Hralstor, you can look at it and kind of see there's an English-related word, hardy. It's a little harder to see than it is to hear. You hear Hralstor and hardy. So you might have Hralstbjorn, or be Hralstbjorn rather, a hardy bear or strong bear. And then Sterkjan, you can actually see in the short version, which is sometimes used, sterk, which means stark. It's strong in that different sense. As far as weak goes, if you use the long U preference, so you get U Megan, U Hralsta, and U Starkan. There you go. Again, that's the best way to form the opposite of these words. There are a handful of words that mean weak, but these are the more common ways of doing it. It also makes it easier because you don't have to memorize as many words. Now, we've been talking about a lot of handsome words or mighty words or strong words. And that might make you think of the word vain in English, which is seen as gil. It's also, this word is interesting in that it means vain, but it also means happy or glad. Think of the old perceived version of the English word gay, which is the direct relation to this. So for a sentence that I've been wanting to get to, which would be simply Volunder ergyo. If you're keeping up in the chat, then you'll see that Volunder ergyo, Volunder is vain. And to a certain extent, ekim gyo. So same way of forming it. Ekim gyo is I am vain. I do want to point out that especially during the Viking Age, before Christianity took its foothold in the North, vanity was not seen as a bad thing or a negative thing. But rather it was just seen as something that happened. Now, if it gets in the way of you doing something, then yes, it would be bad. But you can see in like the Anglo-Saxon chronicles that the Vikings or the Danes were often considered vain, but the Vikings didn't see that as any bad thing at all. It actually meant they took their women. So if someone is vain, they want to not be dirty, filthy. So sauriga would be dirty, filthy, or soiled. Sauriga. Skitoker. Literally translates as shitty, or covered in shit, which I thought was a great one that popped up in the dictionary. Both of these words can also be used as, much like the word filthy or dirty is in English, the same connotations of someone having a filthy mind or being a dirty person. Both those words are completely acceptable to use that way. And in the modern sense of the word shitty, skitugar is perfect. And for the opposite of dirty, which is something that the Viking Age personas would not have liked, is being dirty. It's part of their vanity is they, oh my goodness, they bathe at least once a week. They wash their clothes once a week at least. They wash their face every morning. So you could say that the Vikings were hrein, which means clean. So to see that in a sentence, would be Vikingar eru hrein. Vikingar eru hrein. Literally the Vikings, they are clean, or the Vikings are clean. And you could use uhrein, which is just hrein with that negative through, or excuse me, that negative U at the front, which means for filthy or dirty, unclean. Switching gears a little bit, because I did not lay this out with the intention of doing transitions. That's my poor planning. I will work on segues. The word loud. Which any of us that were at that last event at Fort King George knows that we are a loud people. I think all of the city of Darien might have heard us at one point in time. So, Havar. A note on Havar. Var also means loud. Havar is very loud or rambunctious. The H long A introduction or prefix is much like the D long A that we covered back with dafilg, which just means very or exceedingly. And skjalar also means loud or shrill. So you have havar and skjaldar. Now for the opposite of loud, if you want to be fancy and use a new word instead of just saying, for instance, uvar. Make my handwriting look a little bit better here, since I know at least one of you is writing things down. Hjolder. Which means silent. In the going back to the myths, in the Lokasena, which is the beguiling of Loki, or the truth telling of Loki, you hear that Frigg knows the fates of all, but she stays Yotho. She stays silent. She does not tell anyone. This does kind of have the connotation of keeping the secret as opposed to just remaining silent. But it is also used in the Havamal, the wisdom sayings of Odin, to describe the wise man who does not speak too much. Purely out of my own self-interest, one of the words that I am quite fond of is skeggy. Obviously, it's my name. Now, skeggy means shaggy, or possibly even hairy one. There is a plural form of it, which is the first way I came across it. As skegyar. Skegyar is used a lot for people that live on the islands. A lot of the people of the Orkneys are referred to as skegyar. Kind of like the wild folk, the shaggy ones, the ones who are a little unkempt, the red-headed stepchildren. So you'll notice I use that one as a term of endearment for myself. My main area of study, for those of you who don't know, was on the Old Norse language that was spoken in the Orkneys. So I kind of keep that with me. Again, pure self-interest. Sorry. And you will see that kind of thing a lot as far as people using adjectives as names. So I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, Volender, which is the old pronunciation of Voland, is an adjective. I'm gonna see if I can't remember what that means. I believe it's battle hard. I'm thinking of. I'm looking that up. I will show you one that's really applicable today. Hater, or hate veter. Hater means hot, and hate veter is hot weather. which was, at least down here in the Low Country, extremely applicable. It was like 95 or something like that today while I was out working in the yard. So you would definitely say that is a hate to death. Poland, it's battle brave. So now for the opposite of hater, what you could say the Southern all thing was in the, at least this last February and the February before that as well. Opper, which means chilly, or kalder, which is cold. So you could say a awesome cognate with English and a pretty easy one to remember. Cold weather. Cold weather. Cold weather. All right, just a few more, and I will hang it up. That's all I have prepared. But these are two pretty important ones, especially if you're reading sagas. Form is old. That's an RN. That's not an M. So form and ungar. So, and the reason those come in handy a lot when you're reading the sagas is if you have, say, two people named Carl. You might have Carl the older and Carl the younger, denoting his son. So you would have Carl Form and Carl Unger. And the last one I have, unless y'all want to throw up some more words in the chat room and see if I can't find them, since we're going to have about 10 minutes left over, is kind of a complex word, not in pronunciation. In fact, it is a really easy one to pronounce, but it's complex in what it means. So, Holor. If this is said of a lord or a herra, it means that one is gracious. However, if it is said of a subject, it means he is loyal. So I'll put that into some sentences real quick, just really basic sentences as to what I mean by that. So two sentences here. Jarl Volunder håller, and huskaral min håller. So you have two basic sentences, but mean completely different things. So Jarl Volunder, you know what the title Jarl is, but Earl Voland or Earl Wayland, to carry on with the Anglo-Saxon, is gracious. Now, huskaral min håller. My housecarl is loyal. So to put that in context, if I were somewhere, like if I were at a reenactment and I was talking about my lord, I might say this first sentence, Jarl Volunder håller. Or to make it more complex without adding too much to it, but to tie in our number of the day, Jarl Volunder ein håller herre. So Jarl Voland is a gracious lord. Now that same word, håller, in huskaral min håller, completely changes its perception. So this would be a sentence like something that, say, Seth Garten. You might say that to another person talking about your huskaral. So if a lord says it about his subject, it means that person is loyal. But if a subject says that about his lord, it means that he is gracious. He is a good ring giver, to use a Beowulf line. So that's what I have for the day. Unless y'all come through in the next 5 minutes or so with another word for me to look for. And even if after the video is over, if you want some different adjectives or you're looking for a specific word, let me know. I've kind of mastered how to do that search with that dictionary. Like I said, it can be pretty complex just because there's a lot going on there. So, seeing nothing pop up. In here, for right now, I will remind you that our number of the day is ein, and our rune for the day is fe. Fe represents the letter F. It also means cattle or sheep or livestock. It directly comes into English as the word fee. Okay. I kind of hope that ARD may or may not come up. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. So for those of you that don't see in the chat, which I think most of you do, Nicole is asking about the word ergi. Ergi. In some sources, you will see it as as argur. Argur. It is a very loaded word. It means, as Nicole implied, unmanly, which denotes the passive participation in a homosexual act. Okay, after that, I have to drink. To put that on a more base level, it is taking the feminine role in gay sex. This is not a word you should use lightly in reenactment. I say that not because of the modern connotations of what it means to be a homosexual, but the slightly post-Viking Age laws of Iceland called the Gragaslag, or the laws of Grey Goose, not the vodka, but that's what they're called. They say that the accusing a man of ergi or argur, which both mean the same thing, is a justifiable reason to be cut down in the streets without trial. So if you accuse a man of that, then he has the right, he or his kin have the right to strike you down in the street. It's not a word you want to use lightly. It's a pretty good one for doing the insults before the shield wall. Just saying, I may or may not have thrown that at Logan at this past all thing. So yeah. So I'll pull a couple of adjectives along with our verb to be. So that we can kind of review. I'll try and do one of each. Do all the singulars first, and then we'll move on to the plurals. Pull some of the old ones. So, to go over a couple of sentences, ek im ungar, so I am young. Du ert gil, you are vain. And that ufeger, he, she, it is ugly. Now going on to the plurals. Plurals, this is not the exact way to form them, just because I don't feel like going up and finding the plural forms of the actual adjectives, because I didn't plan ahead for that. Sorry, again. Pre-planning is something I'm getting used to. I'm getting there. So when I say that the adjectives in these sentences aren't exactly formed correctly, you'll just have to forgive me on that one. So, ver snotter. There eruð ráðar. Thou eru megin. So, wir erumsnoter. We are wise. There erus raufer. Y'all are red. Or bloody, actually. I meant to mention that raufer could mean bloody as well. And thou eru Megan. Uh, they are mighty. They are strong. All right. Well, that is all of our time for tonight. I'm excited that we actually made it all the way to the end. I didn't just run straight through. So, that being said, gute Nacht. Hail.